Vincent Pemberton offered Martha Holloway $80 for 40 acres of cliff. He also offered to take her son. He gave her 11 days to decide. The thermometer nailed to her cabin doorframe read 84 degrees at sunrise. Martha Holloway had been hauling water for 20 minutes before the sun cleared the ridge. The pail handles bit into her palms. The rope was already slick with sweat. And her boy Caleb, 10 years old, freckled across the bridge of his nose the way his father had been, was crouched in the dooryard, pouring the last of the morning's milk into a tin crock that already smelled wrong. By 8 in the morning, in the dry summer of the Cumberland foothills in 1883, dairy spoiled within 4 hours. They had been losing 2/3 of the milk every day, since the heat broke open like a lid on a kettle 10 days back. Martha set the pail down, wiped her forehead with her sleeve, looked at her boy. Caleb did not look back. He was learning, in the years since his father had died, to wait for his mother's silences to break on their own. She was about to say something, she did not yet know what, when she heard the carriage. 2 horses, well shod, a surrey with the top down, the sound of wheels cutting fresh lines into the dust of her dooryard. Martha did not turn around right away, because she already knew who it was. Vincent Pemberton of Philadelphia sat on the surrey bench in a black silk vest, a gold pocket watch chain looped across his stomach. He held the reins like a man who paid other men to do that work, and beside him, in a dark coat that no longer fit him quite right, sat her own brother-in-law, Silas Holloway, her dead husband's only living brother. Silas would not look at her directly. That, more than anything, told her what was coming. "Mrs. Holloway," Pemberton said, lifting his hat without dismounting, "we come on a kindness this morning." She turned slowly, with the empty pail still in her hand. He produced 2 folded papers from inside his coat. He held them out together, the way a man offers a child 2 pieces of bread, knowing the child must take both. "What are they?" Martha asked. Her voice was even. She was proud of that. Pemberton smiled, a small, careful smile, the kind a schoolteacher uses on a slow child. "The first is a deed of conveyance, 40 acres of cliffland, the Upper Owl Creek parcel, the one your husband's grandfather Ezra passed to you by separate bequest, $80 cash, paid on signing." Martha said nothing. Pemberton waited. When nothing came, he lifted the second paper a fraction higher. The second carries the seal of the Bledsoe County Circuit Clerk. Caleb stood up in the dooryard. The tin crock was still in his hands. He saw the seal. He took half a step back. "It's a petition," Silas said. Silas was looking at his own boots. "For guardianship of your boy. The hearing is set for the 2nd Tuesday, 11 days from today." Martha looked at her brother-in-law, the man whose wedding had been held in her own front room, the man whose first child she had helped birth, the man who had been a pallbearer at her husband's funeral 2 years before. "Silas," she said, very softly. He flinched. "Martha, listen, it's the heat. They say a widow on a cliff is no mother. The judge has to consider the boy's welfare. He'll be safer with us." "He's my son." She said it quietly, the way a woman says a thing she should not have to say. Pemberton's voice came smooth and low. "Sign the deed, Mrs. Holloway. $80 is generous. The cliffland is worth nothing. Soil's too thin, slopes too steep. No man could plow it. You'll not see $80 again in this life. Take the boy to your brother-in-law's roof. Find a husband by Christmas. The Lord meant for women to be sheltered, not to shelter themselves." She did not answer. She set the empty pail down on the porch step. She turned her back on the surrey, walked to her son, put her hand on the back of his neck. His skin was hot under her palm, hot from the August sun, not from fever, not yet. Behind her, Pemberton tipped his hat one more time. 11 days, Mrs. Holloway. Think on it." The carriage turned. The wheels cut twin curves in the dust. Then they were gone. She stood in the dooryard a long minute, listening to nothing. Caleb was the first to speak. "Mama." "Yes." "What's a guardianship?" She knelt down so they were eye to eye. "It means another man would decide where you sleep, where you go to school, what name you carry. Why?" Because they think a woman alone can't keep you. Can you? Martha looked at her boy, 10 years old, freckled. His father's eyes, his father's small, clean mouth. Yes, Caleb, I can. Then why is the man bringing the paper? She did not have a clean answer for that, so she did not give one. She stood up, looked at the cabin, looked past it at the ridge, past the ridge, where the upper Owl Creek parcel rose 400 feet above the valley floor. 40 acres, $80. Worthless, the man had said. She was not so sure anymore. $80 would feed them 16 months. The way she had been living. $5 a month for flour and salt and lamp oil. The 40 acres of standing hardwood alone, Jonas had told her once, on a winter night when she had not been listening, were worth $400. 5 times what Pemberton had offered. Why offer 80 for something worth 400? Unless the cliff was worth more than Jonas had said. Unless Pemberton knew something she did not. She went into the cabin. The air inside was already 88 degrees. She crossed the room to the loft ladder, climbed up. Caleb followed her. He did not ask why. In the loft, under a folded square of old oilcloth, sat Jonas's tool chest, cedar, 38 years old, built by his father. She lowered it down with rope, one rung at a time. Caleb took the weight at the bottom. He was small, but he was strong for 10. She kept reminding herself of that. She set the chest on the table, lifted the lid. The smell of cedar oil came up, and tobacco, and the faintest trace of pine resin, the smell of him. Her hand went to her mouth before she knew it had moved. Caleb saw. He looked away. She breathed once, then again. Then she reached into the chest. The hammer was there. The froe, the hand saw, the chisel, the 2 pounds of cut nails in their oiled cloth, the level, the small mason's trowel, and on top of all of it, where she had not put it, where Jonas must have before he left for the Hollow Ridge logging camp 2 summers back. His journal, brown leather, the corners worn soft. She had not known he kept one. In 13 years of marriage, she had not known. She sat down at the table. Caleb sat across from her. She opened it. The journal began the year Jonas was 12. His grandfather Ezra had told him to keep it. The early entries were a child's. The dog has had pups. Ma's basil came up. Pa says I'm to learn the saw next month. She turned pages. The handwriting matured. The boy became a young man. The young man became her husband. She found her own name in there, in his hand, written the spring he had courted her. Martha was beautiful at the dance. Her hands smelled like the basil she planted in the south bed. Her vision blurred. She blinked it clear. She turned more pages. Years passed. The handwriting got faster. The entries got shorter. The journal got busier the way a life gets busy. The last entry. 3 lines. Caleb asks me every day when he can use the crosscut. Martha's hands smell like basil. Going up to the Hollow Ridge camp Monday. Back Friday. He had not come back Friday. He had not come back at all. She closed her eyes for a long second, then opened them, turned the page, and something fell out. A folded brown square, paper soft as cloth from age, ink faded to the color of weak tea. She unfolded it on the table. It was a map, drawn in a hand that was not Jonas's, older, steadier. The dates at the corner read, built spring of 34, abandoned for the lower place, 53. The scale was wrong. The north arrow pointed west, but the landmark was clear. A waterfall, 15 feet on the upper branch of Owl Creek. And behind the waterfall, the symbol Ezra Holloway had used was a crude open mouth, a natural alcove. Inside the mouth, a small house symbol, 2 crossed lines for a chimney, a small notation in the margin, vents through fissure overhead, draws like a forge. And under that, in Jonas's own handwriting, copied down years later from what his grandfather had told him. Grandpa said the rock kept the milk cool through August, even in the dry summer of 54. Said the cliff was the family's true inheritance. The valley land was just where we farmed. Martha set the map down on the table. She did not breathe for a long moment, because Because she remembered now. Jonas had told her. On winter nights. By the stove. When she had been mending socks and only half listening. He had told her the cliff was special. He had told her his grandfather had built up there once. He had told her the rock breathed cold all summer. And she had said, "That's nice, Jonas. Pass me the thread." She had thought he was being sentimental. She saw now. He had been giving her instructions. Instructions she did not yet know she would need. "Mama." Caleb was watching her face. "Mama, what is it?" "Your father," she said. She had to stop. Try again. "Your father left us a map, Caleb." "To what?" She did not answer right away. Because if she said the word home now and she was wrong, she would never forgive herself. So she said the smallest true thing instead. "To a place we are going to look at, tomorrow, at first light." Caleb nodded slowly, the way he had nodded at his father's burial, when he had not understood the words, but had understood, somehow, that she did. That night, Martha did not sleep. She read by kerosene light, page after page of Jonas's journal, until the lamp guttered and she had to refill it from the can. She read the entries from the year Jonas was 16, the year his grandfather Ezra had told him about the first wife. Ezra had been married before the woman everyone called Granny Ezra. There had been another, a young one, Maris. Maris Holloway, 20 years old when she came up the mountain as Ezra's bride, 20 years old when she helped him start the cabin behind the waterfall in the spring of 1834, 20 years old when the cholera came through the Cumberland that fall. She had not lived to see the cabin finished. Jonas had written it down the way his grandfather had told it to him. Grandpa said Maris was the one who picked the alcove. He had been planning to build on the south meadow. She walked behind the waterfall on a hot day in May and came back and said, "Ezra, the rock is cold. Build it here. The rock will keep our milk." Grandpa said he laughed at her. Then she made him put his hand on the wall. He stopped laughing. He said when she died that fall, he could not finish the cabin alone. He sat on the foundation stones for 3 weeks and could not lift a hammer. Then 7 women from the lower hollow walked up the path one morning. All of them widows. All of them had buried husbands or children of their own. They brought him bread and dried apples and a kettle of bean soup. One of them, an old woman named Hattie Beaumont, said, "Ezra Holloway, your wife told us before she died that if she didn't make it, we were to come help you. So here we are. Show us where the wall is going." Grandpa finished the cabin that winter. 7 women came up in turns all winter long, bringing food, bringing wool, bringing him their company when he could not bear his own. He told me their names once. He made me write them down. I have them in a Bible, Maris's Bible. It is buried in the root cellar of the burned homestead, wrapped in oilcloth, with her wedding ring. "If anything happens to me, Martha." The next line was scratched out. The pen had pressed too hard. The page had torn slightly. Martha ran her thumb over the scratched line. Whatever Jonas had been about to write to her, he had thought better of it. Or he had been called away. Or he had run out of light. She would never know which. She closed the journal, set her forehead against it, and let herself cry. Quietly. In the cabin. With her son sleeping in the next room. For only the 3rd time since Jonas had died. She slept maybe 2 hours. She woke before first light, pulled on her work boots. Her oldest blue calico, the one that had been navy when she married and was now the color of a faded sky. She shook Caleb awake. "Boots, son, coat, come." He did not ask where. He pulled them on. In the porch corner she filled a flour sack, 2 boiled eggs, a wedge of cornbread, the heel of the cheese before it spoiled, the thermometer Jonas had given her on their 10th anniversary, matches in their tin, a length of twine, the journal, the map. She slung it over her shoulder. She paused at the door. She turned back. She went to the small pine shelf above the bed, took down the family Bible, opened it. She did not know why she did this. Her grandmother Lydia had always done it. "When you don't know what to do, child, open the book and let it fall." The page fell open at Ruth, the 1st chapter, verse 16. She did not need to read it. She knew it by heart. Her grandmother had said it at her wedding. Her grandmother had said it at her grandfather's grave. Her grandmother had said it the morning she put 8-year-old Martha on the train to her aunt's house, the day after Martha's parents had died of the diphtheria. "Whither thou goest, I will go." She closed the Bible, put it back on the shelf. "All right," she said, to the empty room, to Jonas, to Maris Holloway, whoever she had been. "All right, I will go." The path up to the cliff was 120 feet of laid mountain stone, set decades back, by Ezra's own hands, overgrown with mountain laurel and Virginia creeper, but still passable. Martha had walked past the foot of it 1,000 times. She had thought it was a deer trail. Caleb went first. He was lighter. If a stone slipped, she would hear it before she stepped on it. He climbed steady. He had his father's calm in his joints. Halfway up, a slab shifted under her boot. She felt it tilt. Her stomach dropped. Caleb's hand shot back, closed on her wrist. He had felt the weight change before she had cried out. He pulled. She caught the edge of a holly branch, steadied. For a second, neither of them moved. He was looking at her with his father's eyes. "You all right, Mama?" "Yes. I got you. I know." She did not let go of his hand for the next 30 feet. The path skirted the cliff base, ducked under a low limestone shelf, and opened into a side draw where the upper branch of Owl Creek poured 15 feet down a sandstone face, into a clear, deep pool below, and behind the falling water. Martha saw it before she felt it. The alcove, 25 feet wide, 12 feet deep, completely dry. The water fell in front of it, not on it. Inside, the rock was the color of old honey, weathered into shallow scallops by 50,000 years of wind, the air against her face. She pressed her hand to her cheek to be sure. Cold. 20 degrees cooler than the dooryard she had left. At least. Caleb walked past her, set his palm flat against the back wall of the alcove. "Mama?" "Yes, son." "It's cold." "It is." "How can a rock be this cold?" She did not know yet how to explain it. She knew only that her husband's grandfather had built a cabin here once, that his first wife had picked this spot, that the cabin had burned in the war years after he had moved his family down to the valley, and that no one in the county had thought to come up here since. She knew that she could see, in the smoke-blackened high corner of the alcove, where the original chimney had vented through a natural crack in the stone. She knew that the pool below the falls was deep enough for a boy to swim in. She knew that her grandmother had said, "Show them who you are, Sarah girl, not who they made you." Sarah girl. That had been her name once, before she became Martha the wife, before she became Martha the widow. She turned slowly inside the alcove. The floor was uneven sandstone. There were the foundation stones of Ezra's old cabin, half of them tumbled, half of them still in their original line. In the back corner, where a high rock shelf overhung the floor, she saw the burned beams, black, 40 years dead, and under the beams, a tin box, half buried in old ash. She crossed the floor, knelt down, brushed the ash away with her sleeve. It was a tin candy box, the kind a man might have brought home from a trip to Knoxville. The lid had a faded blue scene of a sailing ship on it. She lifted it out, set it on her knee. Her hands were shaking. She made them stop. She opened the lid. Inside, a copper wedding ring, plain, worn smooth, a small piece of linen, embroidered in cross-stitch, M.H., 1834, and a small Bible, its leather cover cracked, but intact. Martha lifted the Bible out, tucked into the front cover, a folded sheet of paper. She did not open it, not yet. She turned the Bible over in her hands. On the inside of the back cover, in faded ink, in a young woman's careful hand, Maris Holloway, Bledsoe County, Tennessee, Anno Domini 1832. Beneath it, in a different hand, older, shaking, the letters laid down by a man not used to writing. "My wife Maris died of the cholera this 14th day of October, 1834. The cabin is half built. I cannot lift the hammer. Ezra." And beneath that, in the same shaky hand, months later, by the look of the ink, "The cabin is finished. 7 widows of this county walked up the path all winter, and would not let me stop. Maris told them to come. I do not know how she knew. Martha closed the Bible. She closed her eyes. She held the small copper ring in her palm. She tried it on her right hand. It fit. Not tight. Not loose. As if the woman who had worn it last had been waiting 50 years for the next pair of hands to pick it up. Caleb had come to stand beside her. He had been very quiet. Who was she, Mama? Her name was Maris. Was she family? Yes. What happened to her? She died, son, before she could finish what she started. Then why is her ring here? Martha looked at her boy. She thought a long time before she answered. Because, Caleb, some people leave instructions, even when they know they won't be there to give them in person. Like Daddy. Like Daddy. She slid the ring onto her own finger, where her own ring had been, before she had sold it, 2 months after Jonas died, to pay the burial. Mama. Yes, son. Are we going to live here? She looked up at the alcove ceiling, at the natural fissure in the stone, the one Ezra Holloway had vented his chimney through. 40 years ago, she looked at the falling water, the cold blue light it cast on the back wall. She thought of $80. She thought of a circuit court seal. She thought of 7 women walking up a stone path in the winter of 1834. She thought of her grandmother, dead 20 years. Show them who you are, Sarah girl. Yes, Caleb, we're going to live here. For how long? For as long as it takes. She did not open the folded paper from the Bible that afternoon. She would open it, eventually, on the night before the hearing, when she would need it most. But that morning, she put it back inside the cover, carefully, where Maris had put it, and she went out of the alcove, down the stone path, back to the valley cabin, because there was work to do, because 11 days had become 8, and 8 days was not very many days at all to build a home. Especially when down in the valley, in the boarding house in Pikeville, Vincent Pemberton was already laughing at the storekeeper's counter. The widow Holloway will sign by week's end, he was saying. The heat will break her. There's nothing on that cliff but rocks and brambles. And beside him, with his eyes on his own boots, Silas Holloway was laughing too. A tight, small laugh. The laugh of a man who owed $200 to the man beside him. The laugh of a man whose own infant daughter was at home in a fever. The laugh of a man who had not yet decided, not all the way decided, what kind of brother he was going to be. The first cedar came down on a Wednesday afternoon. Martha had picked it 3 winters back, with Jonas. He had pointed it out and said, "That one will be ready in 2 summers, 3 at most, standing dead, pink heartwood, best cabin wood God ever made." She had nodded. She had not asked why he was telling her. She knew now. She set the crosscut saw against the trunk, Caleb on the other handle. The first stroke went smooth, the second hung, the third found rhythm. Pull, push, pull, push. 2 hours. Sweat through her calico. Caleb's face went red, then white, then red again. Mama. Keep pulling, son. My arms. I know. Mama. Keep pulling. The tree gave with a long crack like a rifle shot. It fell where she had wanted it to fall, north along the slope, away from the path. Caleb sat down on the stump. His breath came in big animal gulps. She sat down beside him, put her arm around his shoulders. He was shaking, not from cold. Caleb. Yes, Mama. Look at the tree. He looked. You felled that. With me. You and me. Nobody else. Yeah. Remember how it felt? He nodded. She kissed the top of his head. The hair smelled like sweat and pine, like his father. She got up, picked up the axe. 8 days. She had 8 days. By dark, she had the cedar bucked into 8-foot lengths. Caleb had carried 4 of them down the path, one at a time, on a yoke she had made from an old plow harness. He could carry about 15 pounds at his age, half the weight of a finished plank without his shoulder going numb. She did not let him carry more. She watched his shoulder, every trip, for the small white tremor of a muscle pushed too far. That was a mother's body. It told her things, before her son could. That night she boiled potatoes over the alcove fire ring. The first fire she had lit inside the cliff. The smoke went up, wavered, then drew straight into the fissure, the way Ezra had written, the way Jonas had told her on a winter night when she had not been listening. Draws like a forge. It did. Caleb fell asleep with his head on her thigh. She did not move for a long time, because moving meant tomorrow, and tomorrow was the foundation. Day 2. Stonework. She laid slabs from the cliff base, wedged smaller chinking stones into the gaps, built up 12 inches of dry-laid foundation along the cabin's 14 by 10 footprint. Caleb carried the smaller stones. Martha lifted the bigger ones. Her hands by sundown had the small white blisters along the heel of the palm that no farm wife escaped. Caleb had a long scrape down his right shin, where a stone had slipped. She dabbed it with vinegar in the lantern light. He sucked his breath in, did not cry out. "Mama?" "Yes, son." "Why are we doing all this?" She paused, set the rag down. "Caleb, $80 would last us a year and a third if we ate carefully." "That's a long time." "It is. So why not take it?" "Because the cabin, if we build it well, will last you, and your children, and your children's children." He looked at her. "There's a difference, son, between being paid and being kept." "What's the difference?" "Being paid means somebody gives you something once, and then they own the thing they gave it for. And being kept means you make a place, and the place keeps you back." He thought about that. "Mama." "Yes." "Did Daddy know?" "Know what, son?" "That you would have to do this." She did not answer right away, because she did not want to lie. "I think your daddy hoped I wouldn't have to, but I think he was afraid I might. So he left me a map, and the journal, and the journal, and the ring. The ring is from a long time before, from a woman who didn't get to finish what she started, and we're finishing it for her." He nodded. His freckles had gotten darker in 2 days. The sun, the wind, the work. He was 10 years old, and he had just understood something she had taken until she was 32 to understand. Day 3. The walls began to rise. Cedar planks split with the froe. Martha would set the froe edge along the grain. Caleb would tap the back of it with the maul. A long, clean plank would peel off. Each plank nailed to the corner posts with 3 2.5-inch cut nails. Points clenched over on the inside. She had bought the nails at the general store, the week before the carriage came, half a pound. She had not thought of that purchase as evidence. She would think of it again, later, when she found out who had been listening. Down in the valley, that same morning, Silas Holloway rode past Martha's empty cabin 3 times. The door was swinging on its hinges. The cook fire was cold. The chickens were gone. He concluded what she had intended him to conclude. He rode back to the boarding house in Pikeville, found Pemberton at breakfast, took off his hat. "She's gone." "Where?" "Don't know. Sister's in Knoxville, maybe." Pemberton dabbed his forehead with a folded silk handkerchief, a small, precise smile, then filed the abandonment notice. "Today. Today. The cliff is mine by month's end." Silas put his hat back on. He did not move toward the door right away, because something in him was twisting. Because Martha Holloway with $200 of debt riding on her shoulders was not a thing he could quite look at directly. Because his wife Adeline at home had not slept in 3 nights. Because Grace had a fever of 101. Because Adeline had said to him at 3 in the morning, "Silas, I do not have enough milk for her. The heat is taking it." Because Silas Holloway had walked into Vincent Pemberton's office 4 months back, owing a man in Memphis $197 on a card debt. Because Pemberton had paid that debt, without being asked. Because Pemberton had said, "Silas, your sister-in-law is sitting on land I want. Help me get it. Consider the debt forgiven." Because Silas had said yes. Because saying yes had been easier than saying no. Until now. Now, at the boarding house door, with his hand on the latch, he thought of Jonas, his brother. Jonas, who had carried him on his shoulders when he was 4. Jonas, who had taught him to fish. Jonas, who had stood up at his wedding to Adeline. Jonas, dead in the Hollow Ridge logging camp with a cedar across his chest. Silas's eyes burned. He did not turn around. He did not look at Pemberton. He went out the door, got on his horse, rode home. He did not file the abandonment notice that day. He told himself he would file it tomorrow. Day 4. The widow came up the path. Martha was on the alcove floor, splitting shingles, 300 of them, from the second standing dead cedar. She heard a step on stone, the rhythm wrong, heavier than Caleb's, slower than a man's. She set the fro down, wiped her hands on her apron, walked to the alcove mouth. Cordelia Brennan was coming up the path, 65 years old, 5 feet tall, a faded gray dress, a flour sack over one shoulder, a walking stick in her right hand. She had stopped at the bend, was leaning against the limestone shelf, catching her breath. Martha went down the path to meet her. "Cordelia, don't fuss at me, child. Let me get my wind. Sit a minute. Sit my foot. I'll sit when I get to the top." She made it to the top. She sat on a flat rock just inside the alcove. She set the flour sack down beside her. She looked around, at the rising cedar walls, at the scatter of shingles, at Caleb standing wide-eyed at the back wall. She let out a long, low breath. "Lord, have mercy. Cordelia, he told me. Old Hollis told me last night. He said, 'Cordelia, that fool widow has gone up the cliff.' And I said, 'Hollis Penn, you old goat, that is not foolishness. That is an Ezra Holloway alcove.' And he said, 'A what?' And I said, 'Never mind, you wouldn't know an alcove from a hole in the ground.'" She turned to Martha. Her eyes were very bright, very black, very awake for a woman of 65 who had just climbed 120 feet. "Child? Yes. You are a hard woman to find. I meant to be. Good." She reached into the flour sack. She brought out, in this order, a pound of salt cod, 2 pounds of cornmeal, a small jar of honey, a tin of pepper, a folded brown bundle that turned out to be a wool blanket, and last, wrapped in a piece of oilcloth, a small leather notebook. Cordelia held the notebook up. "This was my Patrick's." Martha's eyes went to it. "Patrick Brennan, dead these 11 years. Stonemason in Pittsburgh before he came south to marry me. He built chimneys for 40 years. He drew them. He wrote on them. He cussed at them in 3 languages. She held the book out. Martha took it. "There's a thing in here, child. A thing about chimneys. A thing about wind. He used to call it the back puff. When the wind hits the cliff wrong, the chimney spits smoke down into the room instead of up out of it. He had a fix for it. 3 flat stones, set tent fashion at the top of the flue. Page 41. Martha opened to page 41. A diagram, in a careful workman's hand. 3 stones, angles, arrows for wind. She looked up. "Cordelia, why?" "Because I am 65 years old, child. Pemberton can't take anything else from me. He took my Patrick's pension fight in 76. He won. I lost. I have lived 11 years in spite of that man, out of pure orneriness." Cordelia. "And because, Martha Holloway, your husband Jonas was the one who fixed my roof in the spring of 79. Free. Wouldn't take a penny." Martha smiled. For the first time in 4 days. A small one, a tired one, but a smile. "Patrick's book is yours now, child. Don't lose it. And don't tell that man I came up here. He'd have a stroke." She heaved herself up off the rock, picked up her stick. She looked at Caleb. "Boy." "Yes, ma'am. You listen to your mama, and when she tells you something you remember it, because she is not going to be young forever, and one day you'll wish you'd written down everything she said." "Yes, ma'am." Cordelia nodded. Once. Hard. Then she went back down the path, slowly, with her stick. Martha watched her go. She held Patrick Brennan's notebook against her chest like a Bible. Day 5 and 6. The roof. Martha hand-cut 300 shingles. She laid them in overlapping courses with a 4-inch reveal. Where the drop on the other side was more than 4 feet, she did the climbing. Not Caleb. By sundown of day 6, the roof was on. She lit the second fire that night. A bigger one. To test the chimney with weight in the air. The smoke wavered, then drew straight up, out into the August evening above the cliff. Caleb came to stand beside her. "Will it work, Mama?" "It is working. I mean, will all of it work? The cabin, the garden, the hearing?" She pulled him in against her side. He was the same height as her ribs. "In our family, Caleb, in this summer, on this cliff. Yes, I think it will work." She paused. I am not promising for anyone else's family, anywhere else. I am promising for ours." He nodded. He did not speak for a while. Then, "Mama." "Yes." Daddy would be glad. She did not trust her voice for a second. "Yes, son, I think he would." Day 7 came in white hot, 103 by mid-afternoon, in the lower hollow, in Martha's half-built cabin, 3 walls, the door hung that morning. The thermometer Jonas had given her on their 10th wedding anniversary read 78. She showed Caleb the thermometer. 25 degrees, son. What does that mean? It means we have already done what they said could not be done. That night was when the storm came. She heard it first as a low growl in the east, then as wind on the laurel, then as the first slap of fat rain against the cliff face. By full dark, the wind was driving rain horizontal. Spray came in sideways through the water curtain, wet the porch, wet the cabin door. Inside, the new chimney back-puffed. Smoke rolled out of the hearth in a slow gray tongue. Caleb was sitting at the table. He coughed. Martha threw the door open, slammed the damper closed, pushed Caleb out under the porch overhang, into the cool spray. She stood in the doorway, looked up, out into the storm. She had thought about this. She had not solved it. Until Cordelia Brennan had walked up 120 feet of stone path with her dead husband's notebook. Page 41. "Caleb." "Yes, Mama. I need you to climb." He looked at her. He did not ask why. She went into the cabin, got 3 flat sandstone slabs she had been saving for the cooling shelf, wrapped them in a length of tarred cord. She took Caleb around the side of the alcove, to the place where the cliff rose at a gentle slope. "At the top, son, where the chimney crack opens, set these 3 stones in a stack, tent fashion, so the wind hits the stones first, not the crack. Like in the book. Like in the book. Can I do it?" "You already are doing it." He climbed. She stood directly below him, one hand up, ready. The rain hit her face, hard, cold. She did not blink. He set the stones. He climbed back down. She caught him at the bottom, held him a moment longer than she needed to. "Mama." "Yes, son." "They're holding." She looked up. The smoke was drawing straight again, out into the storm, up, away. They went back inside. She opened the damper. The chimney drew clean. She closed the door behind them, shot the bolt, listened to the rain on cedar shingles. Caleb sat down at the table, wet, shaking, smiling. She knelt down in front of him. "Caleb." "Yes. Some people need to be given a place. Okay? And some people need to make a place. Okay? You were just the second kind tonight." He looked at her, 10 years old, his hair plastered down with rain, his teeth chattering. He nodded, and then he started to cry. Not from fear, from the size of the thing he had just done. She held him for a long time. It was past midnight before either of them slept. Day 8 came up clean. The storm had washed the air. The mountain laurel glittered. The waterfall ran fuller than it had in a week. Down in Pikeville, at the storekeeper's counter, Silas Holloway was buying a plug of tobacco. The storekeeper, a man named Ridley, who had been Jonas's friend, who had no quarrel with Silas, but who had a long memory of Jonas, said in passing, "Mighty quiet up at your sister-in-law's place." Silas paid for the tobacco, did not look up. "She's gone." "That's so. That's so. Funny." "What is?" "Young Caleb Holloway came in here last week, bought half a pound of cut nails." Silas went very still. Ridley did not look up either. He was wrapping the tobacco in brown paper. Said it was for his daddy's tool chest. Polite boy. Just like Jonas. Silas put 2 coins on the counter. He picked up the tobacco. He walked out of the store, mounted his horse. He rode the upper Owl Creek Road. He tied his horse at the foot of the stone path. He walked. Halfway up, he smelled wood smoke, faint, sweet, cedar. He came around the limestone shelf. He stopped. The water was falling. Behind it, glowing through the curtain in the morning sun, was a cabin, A small cedar cabin, foundation stones, plank walls, cedar shingle roof, 2 glass-paned windows. A woman was on the porch, drinking coffee from a tin cup. A boy was inside, sitting at a table by the smaller window, reading a book. Silas Holloway sank down, onto the limestone shelf. He put his face in his hands. He did not weep loud, but he wept, because his sister-in-law had built a house, in 8 days, with a 10-year-old boy, on land Pemberton had called worthless, because she had done what he, Silas Holloway, had told himself for 2 years could not be done, because if it could be done, then he had been wrong, about a great many things. He sat there for 10 minutes. Then he got up, wiped his face on his sleeve, walked back down the path. He did not knock on the cabin door. He rode home. But when he got home, Grace was worse. Her fever had climbed 2 more degrees. Adeline was holding her by the kitchen window. Adeline did not turn when he came in. She said without looking at him, "Silas, the doctor says if we cannot break this fever, she will not live the week." That was the moment. That was the moment a man's heart can split clean down the middle, one half knowing what is right, the other half knowing what is desperate. Silas chose the desperate half. He told himself he would fix it later. He told himself Pemberton would forgive the debt and Grace would live, and somehow, Martha would understand. He went out to the barn, saddled the mare, he rode to the courthouse. He signed Pemberton's amendment as a co-petitioner for child endangerment against his brother's widow. He signed, his hand shook, and Pemberton, who saw it, said nothing, smiled instead, the smile of a man who knew exactly how much a man's hand shakes when he is being bought for the 2nd time. Cordelia Brennan came up the path that evening. This time she did not stop at the bend. This time she came straight to the porch, out of breath, sweat on her temples, her stick in her right hand and a folded paper in her left. "Child, Cordelia, they've moved the hearing." "How?" "To Friday, day after tomorrow." "On what grounds?" "Child endangerment." Pemberton filed an amendment. Silas signed it. Martha did not speak for a moment. She set her tin cup down on the porch rail. The cup rattled. Just once, against the cedar. She steadied it with her palm. Silas signed. Silas signed. She looked at the alcove, at the cabin, at the cedar door she had hung 2 days ago, at her son inside, reading. 2 days, she said. 2 days. 2 days to turn this from a thing they can call unsafe into a thing they cannot. Martha looked at the older woman. "Cordelia." "Yes, child." "Will you stay, tonight?" "I will stay." Martha's eyes filled. Once, she blinked them clear. "Come in," she said. "Come into the house I built." Cordelia walked into the cabin behind the waterfall. She stopped just inside. She looked around. The cedar table, the rope-strung bed, the 2 small glass-paned windows, the cooling shelf in the rock niche, the hearth, the clean white smoke drawing up. She put her free hand against the doorframe to steady herself. "Lord, child." "What?" "My Patrick would have loved this." Martha put her arm around the older woman's shoulders. They stood there a minute, not speaking. Caleb came over from the table. He did not say anything either. He just put his hand on Cordelia's other side. The 3 of them stood in the doorway, the water falling outside, the cabin behind them, the August evening turning blue above the ridge. That was the night Martha did not sleep. Cordelia slept on the rope bed with Caleb, her arm around the boy. He fitted into the curve of her like he had been her grandson all his life. Martha sat at the cedar table, the Bible of Maris Holloway open in front of her, by the kerosene lamp. She had not opened the folded paper from the front cover, not yet. The moment was now. She slid the paper out. She unfolded it, carefully. The fold lines were brittle. It was not a letter. It was a list. Across the top, in Maris Holloway's careful young hand, "If I do not finish in time, ask these. They know what it is to start over." Under that, 7 names: Hattie Beaumont, widow; Imogen Pruitt, lost 2 boys to the fever, 32; Jerusha Tate, widow, lost husband to the bear, 29; Elspeth McCorrigan, widow, Bessie Whitmore, lost 3 children. Old Bet Lacey, widow, twice. Tabitha Allgood, widow. 7 names, 7 women, all widows, or women who had lost children. Maris had written the list before she died. She had given it to her husband, or hidden it in her Bible. She had told the 7 women somehow that they should come, and in the autumn after she died, they had come. Martha read the 7 names again, slowly, like a prayer, across the room, on the rope bed. Cordelia Brennan slept with Martha's son in her arms. 8. The 8th was already here. The 8th had come up the path 2 days ago, with a flour sack and a stonemason's notebook. Martha laid her hand on the page. She closed her eyes. She thought of her grandmother, Lydia McCullum, of the Smoky Mountain Hollows, dead 20 years. She thought of Maris, dead 49 years. She thought of 7 dead women, all gone now, all without graves anyone tended. She thought of Cordelia, 65 and breathing in the next room. She thought of herself, 32 years old, a copper ring on her right hand. She picked up the pen. She dipped it in the small bottle of ink. She did not write her own name, not yet. She wrote instead on the back of the page, so that the front would still be Maris's, August 1883. The cabin behind the waterfall has been built again, by a widow and her son. The roof is on. The chimney draws. The hearing is in 2 days. M.H. She blew on the ink. She folded the page. She put it back in the Bible. She closed the cover. She set her forehead down on the cedar table. She whispered, very softly, so Caleb would not hear, so Cordelia would not hear. Maris, I am 8th. Help me. The waterfall outside answered nothing. The wind in the fissure answered nothing. But the rock at her back, the 50 tons of sandstone above her, the cold of the previous winter, held, the way it had held for 50,000 years, the way it would hold for 2 more days, until the men came up the path, with their papers, and their seals, and their amended petition, and their certainty that a widow on a cliff was no mother. Martha lifted her head. She blew out the lamp. She crossed the cabin in the dark, lay down beside her sleeping son and the sleeping older woman who had come to her without being asked. She closed her eyes. She did not sleep, but she rested, the way a woman rests when she has finally remembered who she is. Friday morning came up bone white. Martha was already on the porch when the sun cleared the ridge. She had been there since 4, with a tin cup of coffee gone cold in her hand. Cordelia was inside, helping Caleb with his collar. The boy had a clean shirt, his father's old necktie, folded once and pinned because it was too long. He looked like a small man. He looked like a child playing at being a small man. Martha did not know which broke her heart more. She set the cup on the porch rail. She looked at her right hand. The copper ring sat there, where her own had been. She closed her fingers around it. Below, in the valley, the thermometer was 86 at sunrise. By noon, it would be over 100. The judge would climb that path in that heat. So would Pemberton. So would Silas. She turned, looked at the cabin, cedar walls, 2 glass-paned windows, smoke drawing clean white from the fissure overhead. 8 days, and 1 woman had walked up to help. And 1 10-year-old boy, and the bones of 7 dead widows, standing somewhere behind her. She lifted her chin. The sun came over the ridge. The day began. Down in Pikeville, at the courthouse steps, Judge Nathaniel Brooks was 63 years old, thin, dry, white-haired. He had been riding circuit out of Knoxville for 30 years. He had walked up worse paths than this one in his life. He stood in the dust of the courthouse yard with his hat in his hand, listening to Vincent Pemberton list the grounds for the amended petition. Pemberton talked for 11 minutes. Brooks listened. When Pemberton stopped, Brooks said very quietly, "Then I will see the premises. Your Honor, Counselor, the petition alleges unsafe habitation. I will see what is allegedly unsafe. It is 120 feet up a stone path. It is, I have walked further, in worse weather. Mount up." Pemberton did not say anything else. Brooks put his hat on, walked to the rented horse. Behind him came the county clerk. Behind the clerk, Silas Holloway's lawyer, a thin, nervous man named Hubbard. Behind Hubbard, Pemberton himself. Behind Pemberton, the young Philadelphia clerk, Thaddeus Wexford, 22 years old, in his wool suit, with a leather case of papers under one arm, and behind all of them, Silas Holloway, on his own mare, hat low, eyes lower. The party rode out of Pikeville at 9 in the morning. By 10:30, the thermometer in town had hit 98. By the time they reached the foot of the stone path, Wexford was already swaying in the saddle. Cordelia saw them first. She was on the porch braiding a length of cord. She straightened. "Child." "Yes, they're here." Martha came out, Caleb behind her. She put one hand on her son's shoulder, the other on the porch rail. She did not move. She watched the line of men come around the limestone shelf. The judge first. Steady pace. Hat in hand already because the path was hot. The clerk, sweating through his collar. The lawyer, vest unbuttoned. Pemberton, red-faced, his silk vest stained dark under the arms. Wexford, white-faced, lurching at every step. And last, Silas, who would not look up. The judge stopped at the alcove mouth. He looked at the waterfall, at the cabin behind it. He took off his hat. He did not put it back on. He turned slowly to take it all in. When he turned back to Martha, his eyes had changed, not softened. He was a circuit judge. He did not soften, but sharpened. The way a man's eyes sharpen when he sees a thing he has not seen before and realizes he is going to remember it. "Mrs. Holloway, Your Honor, I would be obliged for a glass of water. It is unseasonable." She had been ready. The tin cup was on the porch rail, filled before dawn, from the upstream pool above the falls, clean, cold, untouched by livestock. 55 degrees, give or take. She brought it to him on the alcove floor. He drank it down in one long swallow. He exhaled. "Mrs. Holloway." "Yes?" "May I sit inside?" "Yes, Your Honor." "It is cooler." "It is." He stepped through the water curtain. The clerk and the lawyer followed. Pemberton's clerk Wexford did not. He stayed on the alcove floor, bent at the waist, hands on knees. His face was the color of paper. Cordelia Brennan walked over, put a hand on his back. "Sit down, son." "I'm fine." "Sit down." He sat down. Cordelia handed him her own cup. Slow. "Yes, ma'am." "One sip. Wait, one more sip." He drank slow. Cordelia did not look at Pemberton. Pemberton did not look at her. Inside the cabin. The judge took off his coat. He folded it, set it across the back of a chair. He looked at the thermometer on the cedar table beside the cast-iron cook stove that had not been lit, because it had not been needed. It read 70 degrees. Outside in the lower hollow it was 101. The judge did not say anything for a long minute. Caleb was at the smaller window, in the cool blue light of the water curtain, reading the journal. He stood up when the judge came in. The judge crossed to him, laid a hand briefly on the boy's head. "Son." "Sir." "What are you reading?" "My daddy's book, sir." "Your daddy's book?" "Yes, sir." "What does your daddy say?" Caleb turned the journal over in his hands. He looked up at the old man. "He says, the cliff is the family's true inheritance." The judge's mouth moved. Not quite a smile. Something else. He turned to the cooling shelf in the rock niche. A tin crock of milk, a wedge of butter wrapped in cloth, a small wheel of fresh cheese, bread 2 days old, still soft. Martha cut a slice of butter onto a piece of the bread, handed it to him. The butter had not melted. He ate it. He did not speak for nearly a minute. Then, to Hubbard, very mildly, "Counselor, Your Honor, your petition argues that this child suffers improper habitation." "Yes, Your Honor. I am sitting in a 70-degree room. While my own chambers in the valley are well above 90, I am eating butter that has not melted. The cheese on that shelf is fresh. Your Honor, have you any case to make?" The lawyer opened his mouth. He closed it. The clerk was already writing. Pemberton, in the doorway, said quietly, "Your Honor, with respect, the cliff itself is the hazard. Falling stone, loose rock. A child could be—" "Mr. Pemberton." "Yes, Your Honor. Have any stones fallen? I beg your pardon? In 8 days, has a stone fallen on this cabin? Not to my knowledge. Then the hazard is theoretical. Your Honor. Mr. Pemberton, I have been a judge for 30 years. I have heard a great many theoretical hazards. I have rarely heard one filed against a roof that has just demonstrated it can keep a butter dish at 55 degrees in August. He set the bread down. He stood up. I am ready to rule. He picked up his coat. He turned toward the door, and that was when they heard the scream. It came from outside, sharp, female, wordless. Then a man's voice, calling, "Pemberton, Pemberton, help!" Martha was through the door before anyone else moved. The scene on the alcove floor. Wexford had collapsed, not fainted, collapsed, backwards, hitting the sandstone. His eyes were rolled up. Cordelia was kneeling beside him, her cup tipped on its side, water spreading across the rock. But that was not the screaming. The screaming had come from the path. Coming around the limestone shelf were 2 more figures, a man on a black mare, hat gone, sleeves rolled to the elbow, his face the color of clay. Behind him on the same horse, a woman holding a baby, Silas Holloway, Adeline Holloway, and Grace. Grace was 7 months old. Grace was not moving. Adeline saw Martha first. She made a sound that was not a word. Silas pulled the mare up at the alcove mouth. He did not dismount cleanly. He half fell. He took Grace from his wife's arms, held her out toward Martha. The baby's lips were blue at the edges. Her tiny hand hung loose. Her chest rose and fell, but too fast, too shallow. Martha. How long? 2 hours. The fever broke this morning at 104. Then she went still. The doctor in town is at the Penn place. The Penn baby is 2 hours since she ate. She hasn't taken anything since dawn. Adeline. Yes. Off the horse, now. Adeline came down. Her legs went out from under her. Cordelia caught her. Martha turned, looked into the cabin doorway. The judge was standing there, coat on his arm, watching. Pemberton was behind him, pale. Hubbard was behind Pemberton, mouth open. Caleb was at Martha's elbow. Caleb said, "Mama?" "Yes. They came to take me." "I know, son. Are you going to help them?" Martha looked down at the baby in her hands, a baby 7 months old, whose father had ridden up this path 2 days ago and had ridden back down, and had signed an amendment that called this cabin unsafe. A baby whose father had taken $200 from Vincent Pemberton. A baby who had no opinion about any of it, whose lips were blue, whose hand hung loose. "Caleb." "Yes, Mama. There are some people who will tell you that if a person hurts you, you do not have to help them." "Yes, Mama. But your great-grandmother Lydia did not teach me that, and the Lord did not teach me that, and the woman who wore this ring before me did not teach me that." She paused. "Yes, son, I am going to help them." Caleb nodded. He stepped aside. He held the door open for his mother. She moved fast, not panicked, fast. She had thought about this every August of her life, since she was 7, since the year her mother had brought a heat-struck infant into Lydia McCullum's kitchen in the Smoky Hollows, and Lydia had laid the child on a slate hearthstone, had wet a cloth and laid it across the chest, had given water in sips. What Lydia had taught her was rough. It was not how a doctor would do it, but there was no doctor, and there was a child. The child in Lydia's kitchen had lived. Martha had been 7. She had remembered. "Cordelia." "Yes?" "The cooling shelf? Clear it?" "Doing it." "Caleb." "Yes, Mama." "The upstream pool, 2 clean cloths, the big jug." "Run." "Yes, Mama." He ran. "Adeline." "Yes." "Sit on the porch step. Drink the water Cordelia gives you. Do not come inside until I say." "Yes." "Silas." He could not speak. Silas, the young one, Wexford, on the alcove floor. Pick him up. Bring him inside. Lay him on the cedar planks by the wall. Cover him with the wool blanket from the bed. "Yes." "Move." He moved. She carried Grace into the cabin. She laid the baby on the cooling shelf. 53 degrees. Wet sandstone niche just outside the door. She unwrapped the wet wool shawl. The baby's skin was hot. Too hot. The fast, shallow breath. Caleb came back with the cloths. The water. She wet a cloth, wrung it, laid it across the baby's small chest. Not too cold, not too fast. The way Lydia had shown her. She wet another, folded it, laid it across the forehead. She lifted the small hand, held it. The pulse was there, fast, but there. She dipped a corner of the third cloth in the water, touched it to the baby's lips. The baby did not respond. She touched it again. The tiny mouth moved. Once, the smallest reflex. Martha let out a breath she did not know she had been holding. She turned to Wexford. Silas had laid him on the floor. The young man's eyes had rolled back partly down. "Mr. Wexford." No response. "Thaddeus." His eyelids fluttered. "Thaddeus, look at me." His eyes came partway open. "Stay there. Eyes on the ceiling. Slow breath. I am going to give you water. Sips. You will swallow. You will not gulp. Yes?" A small nod. She wet a cloth in the cool water, pressed it gently to his temples, to his neck. She propped his head on her folded apron. She gave him water. 1 sip, 10 seconds. 1 sip, 10 seconds. The way Lydia McCullum had taught her 30 years ago. The old way. Behind her, on the cooling shelf, Grace's breath slowed. In 10 minutes, the baby's breath slowed. In 20, her color came back. In 40, she opened her eyes, looked up at the sandstone ceiling of the alcove, made the small huffing noise that babies make when they are puzzled. Wexford sat up at the end of the hour, asked in a small, dry voice for a piece of bread. Martha gave him bread, with butter. He ate it. Adeline, on the porch, was holding Grace against her chest, rocking her, weeping without sound, her hand on the baby's leg, as if checking, every few seconds, whether the leg was still warm, whether the leg was still there. Cordelia sat beside her, quiet, one hand on Adeline's shoulder. Silas was in the doorway. He had not come further in. He was looking at his daughter, and then he was looking at Martha, and his face was a face Martha had not seen before, on any man. The face of a man who had just understood, fully, for the first time, what it was he had nearly done. The judge had not moved from the table. He had watched, the whole hour, with his hat in his lap, when Wexford was sitting up, eating bread, when Grace was breathing easy in her mother's arms. Brooks stood up. He picked up his coat, did not put it on. He walked to the doorway, stopped beside Silas. He looked at Silas a long second. He did not speak to him. He walked out onto the porch. He stood beside Martha. "Mrs. Holloway." "Yes, Your Honor." "I will rule now, while the parties are present." "Yes, Your Honor." He turned, spoke loud enough to carry. "Mr. Pemberton, Mr. Holloway, Counselor Hubbard, step out here." They stepped out. Pemberton's hat was in his hand. He held it across his chest the way a man holds a hat at a graveside. "The amended petition for guardianship is dismissed." Hubbard nodded once, quickly. "The petition for declaration of abandonment of the Cliffland parcel is dismissed." Pemberton bowed his head. "The conveyance offer of $80 by Mr. Pemberton for the said parcel is, by my finding, manifestly inadequate. I will so note it in my circuit book." Pemberton said nothing. "Mr. Holloway." "Yes, Your Honor." "Stand straight when I address you." Silas straightened. "Today, your own infant daughter was made well in this dwelling, by the woman whose home you tried to take, in a cabin that you alleged was a danger to a child. Do you understand what you have done?" "Yes, Your Honor." "Speak up." "Yes, Your Honor." "You are publicly censured by this court. The censure will be entered in the county register. You will not file another action in any court of this circuit for 2 years." "Yes, Your Honor." "Sit down, Mr. Holloway, before you fall down." Silas sat down on the porch step. He put his face in his hands. Brooks turned to Martha. He put his hat back on. "Mrs. Holloway." "Yes, Your Honor. I will write your name in my circuit book under a heading of my own, persons of demonstrated competence. There are 9 names on it in 30 years. He paused. "Yours will be the 10th. "Yes, Your Honor." "Good day, ma'am." He started down the stone path. Halfway down, he stopped. He turned, He climbed back up, to the porch. He took a small jar of fresh butter from the cooling shelf, wrapped in oilcloth. He put a quarter on the porch rail. He went down again, the butter under his arm. He did not look back. Pemberton stayed on the porch a long minute after the judge had gone. His hat was still in his hand. Cordelia Brennan, who had not said one word to him in the entire morning, looked up from where she sat with Adeline. She did not speak now either. She just looked at him. He met her eyes. He looked away first. Mrs. Holloway. Yes. He stopped. He started again. I misjudged the mountain. She did not answer him. She was watching Grace breathe. He put his hat on. He started down the path. He did not turn back either. Cordelia, watching him go, said quietly, 11 years I waited to see that man walk down a path with his hat in his hand. Adeline almost laughed. She did not have the strength to laugh all the way, but she almost did. It was the first sound that was not weeping. That had come out of her, in hours. Silas was on the porch step, his face still in his hands. Adeline did not go to him. Martha watched her sister-in-law. A long minute. She walked over, knelt beside Adeline. Adeline. Yes. Your daughter is going to be all right. Yes. Take her inside. Put her on the bed. The cabin is cool. Lie down with her. Sleep. Martha. Yes. I knew. Knew what? I knew Silas signed Pemberton's amendment. I did not stop him. Martha did not speak right away. Adeline. Yes. You are not the one who signed. You are not the one who signed. Take your child inside. Adeline went inside. Cordelia followed her, to help her settle. That left Martha and Silas on the porch. She did not speak to him for a while. She sat down, on the porch boards, her back against the cedar wall. She closed her eyes. She let out a breath she felt she had been holding for 2 years. Then she opened her eyes. Silas. Yes. Look at me. He raised his face. It was wet. Older than 34 years of age. The face of a man who had aged 5 years in 1 hour. Silas. You owed Pemberton $200. Yes. And Grace was sick. Yes. And he told you, if you helped him take this cliff, he would forgive the debt. Yes. She nodded slowly. Silas. The fear was not the sin. He stared at her. Your daughter was sick. You owed money to a hard man. You were afraid. That is not a sin. His eyes filled. But Silas, trading my son's life to buy safety for yours, that was a sin. He nodded. Once, hard. I am not going to forgive you today. No, ma'am. Or tomorrow. No, ma'am. It may take me 3 years, or 4, or the rest of my life. Yes, ma'am. But I am not going to let your daughter die because of what you did. The Lord put her in my hands today. I am not going to be a woman who hands her back wrong. Martha. Yes. I do not know how to be your brother again. That is going to be a long road, Silas. Yes. You will walk it. Or you will not. I will walk it. We will see. She stood up, brushed the cedar dust off her skirt. She held out her hand, not to lift him up, just open, between them. He looked at the hand. He took it. She let him hold it for 1 second. Then she let go, turned, went inside the cabin to check on Grace. She did not look back at him. She did not have to. The heat broke 6 days later. A long, cool rain came down off the eastern ridges, settled into the valley for 2 full days. The thermometer fell into the 70s and stayed there. Vincent Pemberton did not go back to Philadelphia. He stayed at the boarding house. On the 3rd day after the rain, he sent Martha a folded note, asking permission to call. She received him on the porch. He paid her $40, cash, for a written statement that she had been treated kindly by him during the week of the heat wave, and that he had withdrawn his offer for the cliff parcel of his own free will. He intended, he said, to publish the statement in the Pikeville paper, so that what had happened on the cliff would not be retold against him in Boston. She signed the statement. He stood up to go. She stopped him at the porch step. Mr. Pemberton. Yes, ma'am. You said something on the alcove floor that day. I did. You said you had misjudged the mountain. Yes. What you misjudged was not the mountain. He looked at her. He did not answer. He tipped his hat. He walked down the path. He did not come back to Cumberland County again. With the $40, Martha bought a milk goat and a young brown cow from Cordelia Brennan, who had a calf to spare and would not let Martha pay full price. Martha named the cow Maris. Silas Holloway in the same week signed 2/3 of his share of the Valley homestead into a written trust for Caleb's eventual inheritance. The judge witnessed it. The clerk witnessed it. Cordelia Brennan witnessed it. Silas did not speak to Martha at the signing. Martha did not ask him to. Adeline came up the stone path the following Sunday, with Grace in her arms, and a covered dish of pork pie. They sat in the alcove and ate it together. Grace crawled along the cool stone floor and laughed. Martha watched her laugh. She did not say much. Cordelia, sitting beside her, took her hand. Did not say anything either. Sometimes the women who have walked it understand, without words. The years moved on. The small cedar cabin held through summer after summer, winter after winter, with no structural failure. The cooling shelf in every August stored Martha's dairy at 53 degrees, through outside temperatures peaking at 98. Cordelia Brennan, after the first dry summer, built a small alcove cooler against an outcrop on her own farm. Saved most of her dairy through the heat wave that took the rest of the lower hollow. A man named Isaac Coleridge from the South Slope built a stone-lined spring house on the same principle. He never lost a child to heat strain again. Word spread. Martha taught the principle to a half-circle of valley women on a Sunday afternoon, under the alcove overhang. Caleb, 14 by then, was the one who handed around the thermometer. 3 things together, Martha said. The rock holds the cold. The water draws the heat from the air. The cool air sinks down and stays. "And how do we do that without a waterfall?" one of the women asked. "You don't need a waterfall. You need stone and shade and a little water. Anyone with stone and water on their own land can do some part of it. You don't need money. You need to look at the land different." The women looked at each other. Cordelia, sitting at the back of the half-circle, smiled into her teacup. Forgiveness came 2 years later. Not with a speech. It came on a Sunday afternoon in the alcove, with Adeline beside her shelling peas, and 4-year-old Grace on her knee, and Caleb chasing chickens out of the garden with his cousin. Silas was repairing a cabinet hinge. Martha looked across the alcove at him. "Silas, yes. It is enough." He had stopped working, set the screwdriver down. He had not turned around right away. When he had turned around, his eyes were wet. "Martha, it is enough now." He nodded. He picked up the screwdriver. He went back to fixing the hinge. That was how forgiveness had come, with a screwdriver, and a hinge, and 5 words. By the time Caleb was 22, he had married a quiet, capable young woman named Esther Bell from the next valley over. He ran a small dairy from the alcove cliff, and a one-man sawmill on the lower flat. The flat his Uncle Silas's trust had restored to him. He and Esther lived in the alcove cabin, with their first child due in the spring. The original valley cabin was rented to a family of newly arrived Welsh farmers, who paid Caleb in milled lumber and fresh bread. Vincent Pemberton of Philadelphia had died, alone, in the boarding house in town. The winter before. He had never gone home, in his small estate. He had left to Martha Holloway of the upper Owl Creek Cliff, his personal Bible. A note was tucked inside the front cover. "To the widow who taught me to read the land." Martha was 44. She still wore the same blue calico on the porch in the long summer evenings. She still wore the copper ring on her right hand. She had also begun wearing, on a chain around her neck, the simple gold band that had been Jonas's. Silas had returned it to her in the 3rd year. He had bought it back from the Pikeville pawn shop and had been holding it since. He had said, "I did not know how to give it back to you. I am sorry." She had taken it. The night Caleb's first child was born. Esther Bell, 23 years old, was upstairs in the loft. Cordelia Brennan, now 77, was up there with her. Cordelia had delivered 11 babies in her life. She had lost one. She remembered that one's name every night before she fell asleep. She would not lose this one. Martha, downstairs, was alone at the cedar table. The kerosene lamp was lit. She had Maris Holloway's small Bible open in front of her. She lifted out the folded paper. Beneath the 7 names, beneath the note she had written 12 years ago. She picked up the pen. She dipped it in the small bottle of ink. She wrote, Martha Holloway, 1883. She blew on the ink. Then, beneath her own name, Cordelia Brennan, 1883. 2 more names, 8 and 9. She folded the paper. She put it back in the Bible. She heard a small sound from the loft, a long silence, then a baby's cry, strong, indignant. The cry of a child who had just discovered the world was bright. Cordelia's voice, faint, from the loft. Martha, come up. You have a granddaughter. Martha stood up. She went to the foot of the loft ladder. She paused. She turned, looked at the cabin, a house built 3 times, once in 1834 by a man named Ezra, with his hands and his grief. Once in the winter of 1834 by 7 women whose names Maris Holloway had written down before she died. Once in 1883 by a widow and a 10-year-old boy. And now, in 1895, holding a child who would, someday, learn the names. Martha put her hand on the ladder. She climbed up, to meet the child. The cabin still stood when the next century turned. The chimney still drew like a forge. The phrase reading the cliff entered the speech of 4 counties along the Cumberland line. It meant looking at land that other people had dismissed, and asking it the right question. The other phrase. The one Caleb said at his mother's grave 30-some years on. A widow on a cliff is more mother than a widow in a courthouse. She had not said it as a saying. She had said it once, on a hot August porch, to a son who had been afraid he would be taken from her. She had not known at the time that anyone else would ever hear it. Some say the cabin still stands today. Some say only the chimney does. Some say only the alcove. But the cool of the rock is still there. The water is still falling. And somewhere out there, tonight, a woman is lying awake, trying to figure out how to keep her child under a roof. When the men with the papers come, she is not the first. She is not the last. She is one of a long line of women who have been told the land they stood on was worthless, and who put their hand against the rock anyway, and asked the question, and listened for the answer.